there's a thing that happens with bodybuilders, and I know we're like way off track now, but and everyone talks about the 3D look, and it's a thing. It's almost like it just comes out of nowhere. A guy will train and be a bodybuilder and compete and train, compete, and his weight will go up, his weight will go up, his weight will go up, and then all of a sudden I'll have one off season, and I'm kind of expecting it to happen to you next off season, where your weight doesn't really go up anymore, and you're like, I was gaining 20 pounds in off season, 20 pounds a year, and now I weigh the same as I did last off season, but somehow you look like you're 30 pounds heavier, and it's for me it was between the Junior USAs and the USAs, same off season weight, both shows, nearly the same contest weight, and just a completely different look, from like my 270 like gym rat in the off season before the Junior USAs. I was a big guy, but my 270 before the USAs was just completely different. Difficult to even find clothes that fit, even though it was the same weight.
That kind of leads me to another question. Well, it's kind of a two-parter. So the first is just specific to me, so I'll be selfish. I think a few weeks ago you mentioned that this coming off season I might not really achieve all that different an off season weight. Like I think I peaked out around 280 or just above this past off season, and you thought maybe I wouldn't end up much higher than that. Do you still think that's the case?
I think you'll probably be around 285, but I think it's going to look. See, but now picture Dorian Yates in the offseason, 285 pounds. That's like a mutant. There's or Ronnie Coleman and the unbelievable. You won't be that lean, but it's a weird thing that happens, and if you're around a bodybuilder while it's happening, but it's hard because you have to be around them all the time to really see it. It almost has to happen to yourself, or if you coach someone, but you'll see it when it happens, and it's a very interesting thing. It's all of a sudden your weight doesn't. Because your weight can't continue jumping forward like that. But there's a difference, like Ronnie Coleman. Ronnie Coleman won his first Olympia at 246 pounds. You're near that weight right now. There's some weird thing that happens. There's lots of guys who weigh 285, 290 in the off season and are not fat, but they don't look like someone like Ronnie Coleman looked at 200. You know what I mean? Sure. And I kind of expect it to happen this year. It's hard to explain. I don't even have a way to explain it, but it's a really weird thing that happens. And Dominic Trevlini, that happened to a couple of off seasons ago. His weight really didn't skyrocket that much more in the off season, where all of a sudden he looked like a balloon, where before he looked like a bodybuilder, a big, but when it happens, it's really kind of interesting. It's when people say they got the 3D look, that 3D look, everyone always says that's what it is. And it's almost like you continue to add weight without adding weight.
Right. Okay. So the other question I was going to ask then is, let's say that happens to someone when they're kind of at the point in their career where they're about ready to turn pro. And then let's say they do turn pro after having an off season or two where their weight didn't really change, but their look did change dramatically. But then once they're a pro, they do need to be bigger to really be competitive at the pro level. I mean, what happens then? What do you have to change to actually put on the new mass to where they do make another 15-pound jump in stage weight?
It doesn't happen. Those are the people who kind of flounder in the third call out to the pro level. Yeah, I mean, there obviously is a limit, because bodybuilders have weighed the same roughly for the last 30 years. We're pretty near that point. A guy around 5'10" and 300 pounds, you don't get many of those, like a big Ramy or Ronnie. And that's around, for as far as we know, the tools we have at our disposal now, that's around the upper limit. And the new things haven't really improved it. Peptides have been around for a long time. Mm-hmm. They haven't changed that. It was basically, you had, like the, 40s, 50s, and 60s, you had, anabolics, and that created a certain look. And then, because Arnold at his peak at like 74, 75 didn't look that much different than the guys in the mid 80s looked. But then in the mid 80s, I think they started pushing doses a little more. You got to like around late, like 1990-ish, 1992. Some guys were getting GH, and able to use low doses in prep, and then you kind of got like Dorian in like 93. And so GH obviously added some component to the way people look. And then you got to the mid 90s, 95, 96. And if you go back and look at some of the old magazines, the 96 Olympia was the first Olympia where like people really realized the benefits of insulin, and a little too much, because everyone was like totally ballooned out, and water, it wasn't like the best look as far as dryness. It was a pretty bad look as far as that. But as far as like fullness, like photo shoot look, the guys were just, you know, incredibly huge. And then, but by like 99, like the 99 Grand Prix in Europe, people kind of nailed. You had anabolics, you had GH, you had insulin, and that's really it. And the physiques have kind of stalled since then. Right. So new things that have come out, like the peptides and things like that, haven't made a leap forward. So other than new products coming out that allow us to make better use of the food we eat, yada yada, we're around that limit. So if that 3D look happens before you're at that range where you can compete as a pro, you know, sorry, but you know, like, yeah. You know, not everyone can be Usain Bolt, not everyone can play in the NBA. You know, you can't play left tackle for the New York Giants if you're not 6'6", 340. Some things, you know.
Do you think this is also one reason? Do you think this is also one reason why some guys end up going from like looking really good as far as shape is concerned to kind of ruining their look, or at least ruining their health in pursuit of that extra 15 to 20 pounds? Because I imagine if you have a guy who like, he gets that 3D look and he's been doing something, I mean, aggressive, but not like crazy by today's standards. Like they say he's taken, I don't know, 2 grams of gear in the off season and like 5 or 6 IUs of GH, and then he decides to like tack on an extra gram of gear and go up to 10 IU. Is that where you get guys who just like, you're not really looking any better at this point, you're just blowing out your waist?
Yeah, and it's more than that, and you can see what happens. And if you follow the sport closely enough, there's an old bodybuilder, Heiko Kalbach, who kind of competed up to about maybe 2006-ish or something. And he was one of the very first logos we had for Troponin Nutrition. I drew the design based off a picture I remember of him. I mean, I probably didn't remember it exactly, but it was him kind of like with his like head down, hands on his hips or something. And I remember he just looked huge. And so I kind of drew a guy with his hands on his hips in that vein. He, I think, had that point. What happens if you're pushing the gear is you have needles, and needles create scar tissue. And you'll start to see shoulders, triceps, biceps. Like go on Instagram and look at King Kamali's biceps. And you know, nothing against King Kamali. You know, he's retired past his 40. He made an amazing career out of what genetics he had. But you can see what the damage has been. And look at Jay Cutler's, his side delts kind of. They're kind of, there's only so many metal jabs into the skin you can get. Each one creates some level of scar tissue. So there's only so much you can push that before those things start happening. With the GH, you have the acromegaly. We talked about Maurice Tillet, you know, the French angel, that acromegaly, or, you know, and so you can see those acromegalic side effects, the widening waist, the rib cage kind of expanding out. Instead of a V taper, you get kind of an A shape with your rib cage, probably from nerve compression, the carpal tunnel type syndromes from all the fluid retention. You get compressed nerves, your triceps start atrophying. Old bodybuilders always lose their triceps. They lose their quad sweep, probably for the same reason. You'll see a lot of guys lose their gastrocnemius, likely for a similar reason. The brachioradialis of the forearm, we talk about all the time, you know. And then you can get similar things like with insulin from chronically elevated blood sugars, because whether you're taking the insulin or your body's producing the insulin, type 2 diabetes is basically from an excess of insulin. And I know that was one of our questions we'll get to later also. There's only so much you can do that as well. And so that's what ends up happening. It's not that those things wouldn't even work. I mean, they don't work, but the limiting factor is that the things, pushing those things to that limit can't help you, because the things that there's the negatives, the side effects, the scar tissue from injections, the acromegaly side effects from the GH, and the you know, metabolic syndrome issues from the insulin just start fighting against you. And that's why the guys who have the best careers are the guys who, like a Dexter Jackson, who turned pro, you know, as a light heavyweight, probably hardly on anything, you know, and they have so much more room to push things before they run into those issues.